So, welcome. My name is Fergal Finn. I'm a standards officer at the National Standards Authority of Ireland. I'm secretary to the Universal Design Standards Committees. Our focus today is the accessibility of products and services to the widest range of users possible, as mandated by the European Accessibility Act. Our webinar today is the European Accessibility Act and standards, providing the new and technical solutions for business. So, I'd like to outline that Elizabeth O'Farrell and Donald Rice will be our speakers today. Elizabeth O'Farrell is a former standards officer with NSAI. Elizabeth is the project leader for drafting the accessibility standard for support services. Donald Rice is the European Accessibility Act implementation manager in Comreg. We switched off the chat function on Zoom, and we provided you with the Q&A feature. So as the webinar goes on, you can submit your questions, and we'll deal with them at the end of the webinar. At this point, I'd like to thank Cormac and Lisa for providing the Irish Sign Language interpretation, and Judith for providing the captioning for us. In the background, I'd like to thank Avery Horn from the National Disability Authority for providing us with the support for the questions and answers. So, why are we here? We are here to promote the public consultation of two new European standards on products and services. Our objectives are to invite Irish DPOs, DPROs, and disabled people in general to comment on and provide revisions to the requirements of the new European standards. There will also be an opportunity to continuously participate in the revision of the standards through the National Mirror Committee. We want to give Irish regulators and industry a preview and insight to the new harmonised European standards that will be published in August 2027. Industry often use the public consultation of draft standards as an opportunity to start work and get ahead of their competition based on the information that's available in the draft standards. So where have these standards come from? So briefly, the European Commission issued us with a mandate 587 as a standardization request to the European, and this was sent to the European standards organizations with regards to the accessibility requirements for products and services supporting the European Accessibility Act. The request identifies European standards that are harmonised to the Act. These include the revision of existing European standards and the development of new European standards. Once published, our European standards will be assessed for compliance with the European Accessibility Act, and if successful, will be considered harmonised and listed as harmonised standards in the official journal of the EU. And then they will be available for sale. So, where have the standards come from? The standards are being drafted at European level in the Joint Technical Committee 12, Design for All. The Secretariat is held by the Swedish National Standards Body. And the NSAI are providing expertise as members of the European Committee using our own National Standards Committee, which is made up of academics, the NDA, accessibility professionals, and our DPROs. So this is mirrored right across Europe, and the main players in the development of the standard are France, Austria, Germany, Spain, Ireland, and Sweden. The members of the NSAI Standards Committee played a leading role in the development of both of the Irish standards that we're going to look at today, the European standards. And our Irish committee includes representatives from the National Disability Authority, academia, a DPRO, and the accessibility professionals. So, what are the accessibility specific standards that we're looking at? We're going to revise the existing standards, EN 17161, which is the Design for All standard on extending the range of users. It's applicable to all products. The other revision is to the accessibility of ICT products and services, the European Standard 301549. We've revised the accessibility of the built environment, EN 17210. So they're being revised at the moment. And the new standards that are being developed under the mandate from the European Commission are the two standards that we have for public consultation at the moment, 18339 for non-digital information and 18340 for support services. There is another standard being developed on the accessibility of emergency communications, but we're not involved in the development of that particular standard. So just looking briefly at the process, after the proposal of the standards were received and accepted by SEN and CENELEC, we started work on the drafting processes in April 2025. That drafting process and the consensus building of the standard has brought us now to the public consultation. The public consultation is open from April to June this year. After that, we will gather all of your comments that you've submitted, and they will be collected by NSAI and submitted to SEN and CENELEC. At the SEN CENELEC level, we will look at all of the comments, and where agreed, we will make changes to the text of the standard. After that, the standard will be approved by a formal vote within the national standards bodies, and it will be made ready for publication. Upon publication, then it will be harmonised by the consultants within the EU. So, how do we get to the public consultation or access to the public consultation drafts? If you can access your standards, your say, from the NSAI website, pull down on the standards menu and click on the comment on a draft standard for your standards, your say. Take a little scroll down the page and you'll see the link to your standards, your say. On clicking that, you can input then the number of each of the standards, 18339 and 18340. That will give you access to the standard, where you can download, or sorry, you will have to register on the site, and then you can download the draft by clicking on the PDF symbol. How do you submit your comments? Well, we ask that you put in the clause number, the type of or the comment that you've observed, and then follow that up with the proposal for the change you'd like to see in the text. Following that, you can decide whether it's a general, editorial, or technical comment. And if you wish, you can put in your name. All of these comments will be looked at by the National Committee before they're submitted to SEN. So whatever you think your comment is, I would encourage that you put it into the portal. I'm also available to work with you man to man or face to face if you wish. Okay. NSAI will submit their comments on the 2nd of July. That's the closing date. So based on that now, I'm going to hand you over to Elizabeth O'Farrell. Elizabeth is the project lead for the accessibility to support services standards. She's an engineer by profession and holds a master's in law. and an MBS in health and safety. She's previously held the project management position for the Universal Design Standards Committees within NSAI. And previous to starting in NSAI, Elizabeth worked in a number of industry sectors, including medical device, automotive, light engineering, and electronic hardware manufacturing. So I hand you over now to Elizabeth Farrell.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to have everyone on the call this morning at this webinar. So thank you, Fergal, for introducing me. This morning, I'm going to cover briefly the EAA, development of the standards in the support of the EAA, and Mandate 587. And we're going to have a quick overview on the two standards that Fergal referred to. Standards on support service, accessibility of support services for products and services. And we're also going to look at accessibility of non-digital information related to products and services. Next slide, please. So, as Fergal has already alluded to, the European Accessibility Act covers a range of products and services. It requires economic operators, manufacturers, distributors, importers of certain products and services to meet minimum accessibility requirements from 28th of June 2025. And the list of those products and services under the scope of the European Accessibility Act can be found in Article 2 of the EAA. And those minimum accessibility requirements are documented in Annex 1 of the European Accessibility Act. Next slide, please. So, the EAA was subject to national transposition by the Member States in June 2022. And Mandate 587 was issued by the European Commission to the standardization bodies. We call them the European Standardization Organizations, for a number of harmonized standards in support of the EAA. And Fergal has already referred to this and has provided lots of really useful information. Next slide. So, what about these standards and the use of these standards? Well, we know that standards can enable organizations to demonstrate their products and services are compliant with legislation. They also provide a level playing field for industry. They allow organizations to compete on equal terms and provide a clear and identifiable baseline for contracts and clients. And harmonized standards provide a presumption of conformity to applicable legislation or directives. And lastly, but not least, manufacturing and economic operator organizations can demonstrate compliance through alternative technical solutions and evidence. And of course, for a level playing field and ensure consistency for the consumer and the user of the product and service, we would support the use of harmonized standards. Next slide. So the first standard we're going to look at is accessibility of non-digital information related to products and services. And that is has a number, and that number is 18339, PREN 18339. So with every standard that's developed, whether it's at national or European level, it has a scope. And this helps the reader of the standard and the user of the standard to understand what is covered or addressed within the standard. So the scope of this standard is that this document provides requirements for the presentation of information on and about products and services in visual, auditory, and tactile non-digital forms for the sensory channels of seeing, hearing, and touch. Next slide. So to drill down a little bit more into the scope of this standard, we look ahead in different silos. It's information about the functioning of the service and information about the accessibility of the products used in the provision of the service. The requirements also include information on a product's functioning, information on a product's accessibility features, elements, functions, and characteristics, information on the use of the product, and on the product itself. It also includes instructions for use of a product, not on the product, but provided through other means. Instructions for products such as installation, maintenance, storage, and disposal of a product. The requirements also include information provided on a package of a product, information provided in a package of a product, information about some types of transport services, and information about consumer banking services. So it's quite a detailed scope. So to get a better understanding in the context of this standard, what we mean by a number of terms, the first one is information, and that is set out in clause 3.2 of the draft standard 18339, and information is defined as data that are processed, organized, and correlated to produce meaning. And when we talk about non-digital form, that's set out in clause 3.3 of the standard, and in the context of this standard, it's defined as visual, auditory, or tactile information communicated in one direction, which cannot be changed or adapted by the user. And we give examples in the draft standard about the different types of non-digital forms. So information in non-digital forms can include, but are not limited to, visual labels, signs, posters and documents, auditory speech and acoustic signals, tactile lettering, symbols and shapes. So in the scope of the standard, we talk about the provision of information in visual, auditory and tactile form. So what do we mean by visual forms? Visual forms, we mean printed signage and instructions provided in the provision of a service. Auditory form is real-time transport information that is shared over speakers in a transport station, spoken live by personnel. And tactile form, a raised dot or notched edge indicating the purpose of a button, feature or function on the surface of a product or package. Next slide, please. So what does the standard cover? The standard covers requirements for the presentation of information via more than one sensory channel. The sensory channels that we are referring to are seeing, hearing, and touch. The requirements for visual, auditory, and tactile forms of information, and requirements for the presentation of the information that is perceivable and understandable. So information contains, within this standard, it contains perceivable requirements on each form of visual, auditory, and tactile, and it contains understandable requirements on each form of visual, auditory, and tactile. Next slide, please. So the standard is set out in various clauses, and in clause 4, it sets out requirements for information in accessible non-digital form, the presentation of information from multiple sensory channels, and testing the presentation of information. Clause 5 gives more information about visual non-digital form requirements. Clause 6 refers to or outlines requirements for auditory non-digital form requirements. Clause 7 has requirements for tactile non-digital form. And following that, there are a number of annexes within the standard, and they are set out in Annex A to M, and they provide a range of information on information elements, readability tools, acoustic font, and text layout. Next slide. So that's a kind of a whistle-stop tour of the standard 18339 on non-digital information. Fergal has already referred to how to access these standards, and you can download those standards and get information on the standards. But in summary, 18339 sets out requirements in the context of the EAA in relation to non-digital form of information. It sets out visual, auditory, and tactile information communicated in one direction which cannot be changed or adapted by the user. The standard sets out requirements for the presentation of information on and about products and services in visual, auditory, tactile, and non-digital forms for the sensory channels of seeing, hearing, and touch. Next slide, please. So now we're going to move on to the second standard that is open for commenting, and that's accessibility of support services for products and service, and it is known as 18340. So the scope of the standard, again, each standard has a scope, and the scope of this standard is that this document specifies requirements for an accessible support service. And this includes general information about the product and services, including information on their accessibility. This document provides requirements for an accessible support service designed so that information and communication can be accessed, understood, and used. And the key words in this part of the scope is information and communication. Support services include, but are not limited to, help desks, call centres, technical support, and training services. And this document applies to support services that are provided digitally or face-to-face. So, what are we talking about when we talk about types of support services? And within the standard itself, there's a really good figure that tries to set out in figure 1 on page 12 of the standard. We talk about the types of support services, and we split them out into digital support services and non-digital support services. Digital support services include automated systems, and within automated systems, we have AI automated systems and rule-based automated systems. Also in digital support services, we have self-service tools and repositories and remote human support in digital form. And in non-digital support services, we have remote human support, and we categorize that as analog, and in-person support. Next slide. So again, in 18340, we have a number of clauses to set out requirements and information about support services. And in clause 4, we talk about support services and try to give more information to the reader to understand what we mean about support services. And clause 5, we talk about requirements for communication. Clause 6, requirements for the presentation of information about products and services. Clause 7 talks about the operation and the functioning of the support service. And clause 8, requirements for information for the user. of that product or service that they talk to the support service about. And then we have a number of annexes. Again, some annexes are informative, but within this standard we have two normative annexes, and these normative annexes support the clauses within the standard. One of them is a normative requirement for user accessibility criteria for support services with automated support systems. And Annex B has a normative requirements for user testing of automated support systems. And Annex C goes on to give information about lived experience of persons with disabilities engaging with support services. And Annex D provides information guidance on with respect to competence and knowledge of support service personnel. Next slide, please. So in clause 5, we go into detail about the modes of communication and the requirements across the range of communication. So we have user interface, requirements for contacting the support service, outsourced services, voice communication, requirements for the provision of real-time text and total conversation, written communication, and automated support systems. And these automated support systems include voice-based and text-based automated systems. Next slide, please. And the requirements for the presentation of information about products and services are set out in clause 6. And this sets out requirements when a support service presents information about the accessibility of the product and service, accessibility and compatibility features, on and about products and services, and about the accessibility and compatibility features of products and services in non-digital form. And we talked about that standard 18340, and digital form, which can be found in EN 301549 standard. Next slide. So in clause 7, we have operations of the support service. Clause 8 is information for the user, and Annex A and B, already we talked about normal requirements for user accessibility criteria and user testing. Next slide, please. So in summary, accessibility of support services, PREN 18340, sets out to address requirements for the provision of a support service, information, means of communication, and contacting the support services. And this standard includes digital and non-digital requirements. And it also sets out requirements for support services that are outsourced. And we know in today's businesses that a number of support services are outsourced, but the requirements set out in this standard are valid and are also applicable to outsourced services. The standard also includes requirements when automated systems are used, requirements for the operation of the support service, including dealing with complaints, competence of support service staff, and support services located in a business premises. And Fergal already referred to that standard on the built environment, which includes a business premises, and that's in EN 17210. This standard sets out requirements on user testing in Annex A and Annex B. And very importantly, information for the user of the support services with respect to about the accessibility of the support service itself and the provided products and services and where the accessibility information on the product and services are located. Next slide. So thank you very much. It was a very fast run through the standards, but if you download the standards and contact Fergal for further information, thank you.
Elizabeth, thank you very much. Um, Elizabeth has, in her role as project leader, such a knowledge of what is in those standards. Next up, I'd like to introduce Donal Rice. Donal Rice is the European Accessibility Act Implementation Manager at Comreg. Donal previously worked as the head of unit for the Web Accessibility Directive at the National Disability Authority and has been involved in standards development for over 15 years. So I will now hand you over to Donal. Thank you, Donal.
Thanks very much, Fergal, and thank you, Elizabeth, for that overview of the two standards. And Comreg broadly welcomes the development of these standards, and we will be taking the opportunity to consider them and to comment on them in this commenting period. We're getting to the business end of the standards development process here. Fergal, I think you'll agree in terms of through this commenting period, it's really now or never for regulators, for businesses, for persons with disabilities, and DPOs and DPROs to have their say. So while we've been keeping a kind of a watching brief on the development of these standards, we're very much sitting up and taking heed of what they say. So thank you for the opportunity as well to talk to you today about some thoughts that Comreg have on these standards, particularly the standard on support services. Okay, I'm going to share my slides, and Fergal, can you confirm that you're able to see my slides?
I can see your slides, Donal.
Yeah, great, thank you. So Comreg is the Commission for the Regulation of Communications, and we're responsible for regulating what we call electronic communication services in the postal sector in Ireland. And our focus is on protecting consumers and facilitating competition and ensuring that every consumer has access to electronic communication services, including consumers with disabilities, and that people have equal access and choice when it comes to electronic communication services. And mobile phones today are one of the most accessible technologies that's available. If we consider that through a mobile phone, it's possible to make a sign language call, it's possible to convert speech into text, and it's possible to have text and other information read out by the mobile phone. All of these features were, when I started in Accessibility First, they were really very specialized services that needed a lot of specialized equipment to be able to provide them. Today, they're available on mobile phones in our pockets, and it's important, therefore, that we ensure that the services that are wrap around these devices, that provide people with access to these devices, are fully accessible. I'm not going to go into what the EAA covers. It covers a wide variety of products and services. Comreg has responsibility for those in the ECS sector. It has been transposed into Irish law under regulation SI 636. And it brings benefits to both businesses and consumers. But a key aspect of the European Accessibility Act and the Irish regulations are the harmonised standards that are going to define the very high level accessibility requirements set out in the directive. So these standards they're really going to put the flesh on the bones of the European Accessibility Act, and that's why Comreg and other regulators are taking such an interest in these standards. Comreg, as I said, is the competent authority for electronic communication services under the Act. And that breaks down into 4 broad areas that we are responsible for ensuring the accessibility of or compliance of ECS providers to provide accessibility in 4 broad areas: websites and mobile apps, accessible information, support services, and the provision of a new service or new services called real-time text and total conversation. And I'm going to talk a little bit about real-time text in a couple of minutes, just to give you a clear view as to what that is, just in case it's new for anyone. So to reiterate, the role of Comreg is a competent authority under the EAA. There are 6 regulators that have responsibilities under the EAA in Ireland. Comreg does not regulate the accessibility of the devices. That's under the remit of the CCPC. But we do oversee compliance of ECS providers across the areas I outlined. And our role is to monitor compliance. It's to handle complaints, and anyone who has a complaint about the accessibility of the service being provided by the ECS provider can do so by contacting our customer care team. And I've included a link in the slide, but of course you'll easily find it online if you look up Comreg. And we will take enforcement actions, including issuing directions to ECS providers to comply with the European Accessibility Act regulations. And Comreg provides a range of information resources on its website in that regard. I want to talk for just 1 minute about RTT, because real-time text is a brand new service, and as such it's a little different to other parts of the European Accessibility Act, but it is relevant to the support service standard as well. So real-time text is a new service which adds a text channel alongside a mobile voice call. The text is transmitted instantly over a voice call channel, and it displays each character on the other person's screen as it is typed. And RTT allows users to read text instantly as it is being entered, creating a real-time conversational experience. It's particularly useful for deaf, hard of hearing, or speech impaired users. So it's a brand new service that is being provided by providers in Ireland, and it's particularly important for contacting emergency communications. And I'm going to show a slide that tries to mimic what a call is like when made to an emergency services. And it will show a mobile phone, the dialer on the mobile phone, and how someone is able to dial an RTT call in the same way as you would dial a voice call. And then their text is displayed as they are typing in real time between them and the emergency operator. So a person opens their phone, opens the native dialer on their phone. They have the option to make an RTT call. And as they are typing, the text is coming up on the emergency services operator screen. So they're getting the information in real time. So it's a much more natural and conversational way of texting, but it also enables more rapid communication. And as I said, it's native to the phone. It doesn't involve registering or downloading an app or anything like that. Okay. So Comreg views the support services standard as very important in terms of providing services to consumers. It aligns with Comreg's view of what the customer journey is in using an ECS service. So consumers typically will look up and research a new service. They will sign up for a service. They may switch, and that's particularly important in the mobile phone and broadband sector, where people switch providers on a regular basis. And then they will use the service. And the support service standard, the current draft as we've had access to it or we've seen, maps onto and takes account of all these different customer journey steps. And we're particularly impressed that the standard addresses some of the common barriers, accessibility barriers and difficulties that we see consumer having with some services. And those can be lack of alternative communication channels, poor staff awareness around accessibility, complex language and interfaces, and inaccessible automated systems, particularly systems, automated phone systems like IVR systems that can be particularly difficult for some users to use. And we also welcome that the standard outlines a set of design principles, and those include providing multiple communicational channels. So it's important that people are able to communicate in more than one way, so that if they have a difficulty communicating over the phone, for example, that they're able to transact with the service in another way. The standard emphasizes the use of plain and easy to understand language, and that's of benefit to everyone. It emphasizes ensuring compatibility with assistive technologies, and that's a real core requirement of the European Accessibility Act, that services and products are compatible with assistive technologies. And the standard also emphasizes the need to also always offer a human alternative, so that ultimately someone can deal with a human, a person, at the end of their call or at the end of whatever way it is that they're communicating with the business. So we welcome how the standard is attempting to address all those steps in the customer journey, and is addressing many of the difficulties that we see people have and businesses have as well in trying to provide a consistent and accessible service. So I think the detail of the standard, while it isn't finalized and there's work yet to be done in it, is very welcome in adding a lot of detail to what we really need in the telecommunications sector and other sectors as well, to ensure that there's a common understanding of what accessibility means. And finally, Fergal, I'll just finish off by giving a few benefits as we see it to businesses for being involved in these standards, but also adopting the standards. And standards, particularly harmonized standards, provide a legal certainty. So there is the mechanism in the European Accessibility Act and the Irish regulations for what Elizabeth called a presumption of conformity with the requirements of the Act. So if you comply with the harmonized standard, it's presumed that you're complying with the accessibility requirements in the Act and the regulations. And that simplifies compliance for everyone. It can result in lower costs, so clearer technical standards minimize rework of services or rework of products. And we've really seen this in the area of web accessibility, which has been much better served, I suppose, by standards over the years, where there's clear technical standards for web accessibility. And I remember a time when you would add on maybe 25 or 50% to the cost of a website if you wanted to be accessible. Well, that's now increasingly not the case. It's costing people money and businesses money to retrofit their websites, but not in procuring new websites, because businesses, particularly the web design and development sector, are providing accessibility by default. because there's such demand due to the regulations. So these clear technical standards can minimize rework, interpretation, legal overhead, and costs in general. And there is the benefit of EU market scalability. So businesses can now design once and deploy consistently across all member states, knowing that the accessibility requirements in the different member states have been harmonized through the development and use and implementation of these standards. And it's a better user experience for all. I mean, I think we're all well aware on this call that accessibility improves an enhanced experience for everyone, not just customers with disabilities. And for businesses, it expands the customer base. So it enables businesses to reach more users, including persons with disabilities and aging populations. So I'll just finish by saying, Fergal, that aligning with harmonised standards, it's not just about compliance. There is a strategic advantage to businesses, and we look forward to participating in this commenting phase of the support services standard. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning.
Excellent. Thank you, Donal, and thank you for giving us the insight from a regulator's point of view, of which you're one of a number under the EAA. So thank you. Avery, do we have any questions and answers from our audience?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. We do have a couple of questions here. The first question, Fergal, is going to be for yourself, which is that the webinar is being recorded today, and we would like to know, is it going to be distributed to people afterwards, and will that recording have ISL interpretation?
It will. So the ISL interpretation provided by Lisa and Cormac will be on the recording as well as the captioning, which we will send to everybody that is registered to the webinar, and we'll also make it available on the NSAI website.
Great, thank you. And then just another question here, which is where can we access the standards? And I know that you went over the commenting procedure, but is it possible to send the comments in other formats, such as emailing them directly to yourself?
Absolutely. You can contact me directly, and there are a number of persons that I deal with, and we have our own way of introducing those comments. I align them then so that they're produced in the standardized manner for the process, but absolutely no problem there. And if you wish, do you want me to go through the Your Standards USA portal for accessing the drafts of the standards once again?
I think that's
Or
okay, but we can definitely say that it's on the Your Standard Your Say portal, and if there are any other requirements that you need, if it's not accessible to you, you can reach out directly to Fergal. And then Fergal, your email address there is fergal.fin
at
at
NSAI.
NSAI.
Sorry.
That's okay. .ie. NSAI.ie. Okay, thanks so much. The other question we have here is actually for Elizabeth O'Farrell. So I'll give her a moment to appear. And that question is, does the pre-EN 18340 on support services cover access to support services and information through sign language?
That's a very good question, Avery, and you might be aware that we've had long conversations about this at committee level, at European level, and we're very conscious of the fact that in different jurisdictions, there's different requirements with respect to sign language. So the standard has set out, if I'm not mistaken, in clause 5.6 or 5.5, requirements where a support service provides sign language and sign language interpretation. There are requirements there, but it is in relation to where a support service provides that service.
Mhm, mhm. Okay. So another question we have, Elizabeth, for you is what are the types of auditory formats that are covered by the non-digital information standard? Can we have an example?
So I guess we're talking here about communication with respect or to announcements. And I think I referred earlier on, typically would be announcements of real-time transport information over speakers, whether that was live or whether it was pre-recorded. And clause 6 of the non-digital standard uh, refers in more detail to that.
Great, thank you. And then we do have one last question for you, Elizabeth, and that is, are there requirements on AI support services within the support service standard?
Yes, yes, we have acknowledged through numerous discussions with numerous stakeholders that there are automated announcements and use of AI very common and becoming more common, and therefore there's clear requirements set out in the standard on support services in relation to automated support services and systems, clause 5.8. And we have set out clear requirements in a normative annex in relation to the testing and validation of those AI automated systems.
That's wonderful. Okay, well, right now we don't have any other questions, but I did want to say that if for any reason you couldn't get your question answered today, you can again contact Fergal at his email address, which is again fergal.fin@nsai.ie. And of course, the standard is still open to have comments, so please do put those comments in. So I'll turn it back over to Fergal to close out the webinar.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Avery. So that completes the webinar. Like I said, if you wish any information from NSAI, please contact myself directly. I'd like to thank Elizabeth O'Farrell, our project lead on the European standards for non-digital information and support services. And also thanks to Donal Rice from Comreg on giving us that insight from a regulator's point of view. Thanks to Avery for managing the questions and answers. Thanks to Lisa and Cormac for providing the ISL interpretation, and to Judith for the captioning. So thank you very much, folks. I hope it was of use to you, and look forward to hearing from you. Goodbye. Thank you.